Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCod.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. I'm here in the studio with Jerome Karter, Executive Director of the Cape Cod Symphony. Jerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Now, you've announced that you'll step down from your position as Executive Director of the Symphony, ending an important era in the organization. And tell me how you first got involved with the Symphony.
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, the title is Executive Director of the Symphony and the Conservatory. How did I get involved with the Symphony? When I retired to the Cape in 2002, a good friend of mine introduced me to the then chairman of the board, and we chatted. And I'd never been to the Symphony until they gave me a few free tickets and said, would you like to go? I was impressed. I found it very interesting. It didn't have the same sound as the New York Philharmonic, where I had a box with my company in New York. But I quickly fell in love with the organization, and they asked me to join the board. I became vice chair when the then executive director suddenly left. They said they looked around the room and said, "Anybody here want to do this for a while?" And I put my hand up, and that's it. That's 9 years ago.
One of those times where everyone steps back and you're left standing there. Sounds like a little bit
close to it.
Now, there have been so many changes, particularly in recent years, and since you've been at the helm. And so, talk about those. And you mentioned how you're also executive director of the Cape Cod Conservatory and the joining of those organizations. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that was a very interesting period for the Symphony and the Conservatory. We were actually approached at that time by the Conservatory, suggesting that it might be a good idea to put the two organizations together. And our board took a long, hard look at that. We did what's called in the for-profit world good due diligence, and it took about 2 years for everybody to get on the same wavelength. That means both boards, the Symphony Board and the Conservatory Board. But finally, it was agreed that this did make a lot of sense. There were several foundations that gave us $350,000 of encouragement in order to do it, because that's what was needed to absorb the first few years of expected expenses and losses until it could get to the break-even point. Now, that was in 2010 when the organizations came together, and since then it has grown and become a very, very viable and vital part of the Cape.
Now, did you end up combining the two boards? Because I would think that would be really one of the challenges is in terms of when you talk about getting people all on the same page. You have to get people who have been concentrating on their one organization to think about these two organizations as a whole.
Yeah, we combined the boards. It really made no sense to keep two separate boards at that point. And so a number of the directors from the Conservatory stayed on, and then the total board became enlarged, but only for a period of time. And then it was due to go back to a more reasonable number of 30 at that time. But the whole organization then ran as one, and the challenge, of course, was to do the full integration. And one of the things that we did do, first of all, is to hire a fantastic managing director, Stephanie Weaver, for the head of the Conservatory. So it had plenty of good leadership, and then hired a number of people who would work for both the Symphony and the Conservatory for fundraising, for the financial management, and mostly those two areas.
Now, what are the challenges for a symphony in this day and age?
Well, the challenge, first of all, is to remain relevant, and the only way you remain relevant is by producing stuff, I would say, that people want to come to, and not just in the in purely classical sense, or what we now are calling masterpiece programs, but also pops. But it's more than that. It's got to be a full experience. It's we don't care whether people come in black tie or jeans. There's got to be a sense of I'm coming to have a good time and to enjoy a live performance. So it means programming that is interesting, exciting, relevant. And, the big change there was to hire Jung Ho Pak. In fact, it's one of the first things that I was involved with when I became executive director. That was the time of the search. And we hired him in the beginning of 2007. And since then, we have brought a lot of innovations to programming and also added many, many concerts.
And by all accounts, you're doing a lot of sold-out concerts and a lot of excitement about the concerts and the different programming. Have the number of patrons gone up quite a bit in the last few years?
Oh, tremendously. Patrons have gone up significantly, but as reflected in the dollar numbers, which were at $450,000 of income for the symphony in 2006, and we're now up to about $1,006,000 in income for the symphony. So the growth has been tremendous over that period of time.
So it's a huge amount of growth, and of course that brings us to what goes on in the future and what future goals are, because in order to sustain the growth, you have to, I guess, look around at your performing space. So I wanted to talk about the idea of a new performance space, and I know your group has come before Barnstable Town Councilors and a lot of different organizations across the Cape to talk about this. So tell us where you are in the process now with this.
Well, that's a great segue. Where we are in the process is that the board set out a few years ago to do a very serious study about whether this would make sense or not for the symphony, and because we are up against limits where we are. The school wants its theater more, and we would like it more, and so we're both sort of blocked. So there's got to be a long-term solution for this. Maybe long-term is the wrong word. Maybe it should be a short-term solution. We want to do something as fast as we can, but these things take time. The first thing we did in order to make sure that we would be realistic is to hire an outside consultant who has the experience with this in that world. The project took about a year, and the conclusion was, yes, it's possible to do it. And that means more than anything else, can it be financially sustainable? Their conclusion was that it could be, and of course these things are easier said than done, but it can be done. So that was phase one. We finished phase one last August, and since then we have been in the process of preparing, I would say, for phase two, which is to continue studies on where could it be sited. If we know a site, how much space do we need on that site? What kind of a building? What are the objectives to bring to that building? Should the conservatory become part of that, for example? That's a question. What is the economic impact on the city, on the area, on the Cape by bringing that kind of an operation here, and of course the biggest thing of all, can we raise the money? Is the funding out there to be able to come up with a quite sizable dollar figure, as you can imagine, because we're talking about a theater that is almost the same size as what we have now at Barnstable. So we need about 14 to 1,500 seats in that area. Which is sort of an ideal. we're all working very hard on it to try to get money for Phase 2. So if there's anybody out there who would like to support us, come and see me. But it's an absolutely viable project that I think we're all totally committed to.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal, and I'm talking to Jerry Karter, Executive Director of the Cape Cod Symphony and the Cape Cod Conservatory. Now, where you're stepping down as Executive Director, does that mean you'll be able to really focus solely on this project? Is that part of the reason for stepping down?
No, actually, I'm stepping down from everything that I'm involved with. I think it's the right time for me to do that. This project needs separate focus also. So the planning at the Symphony is to replace me for both the management of the Symphony and Conservatory and for this project. The Oceanside Performance Center, OSPC for short, which came out of the brains of one of our trustees one moment when we said, we need a name, and he said, how about that? And of course, that's the great thought. Could we put something on the edge of the water somewhere, like has been done in other symphonic sites? And so it's a dream word.
And so tell me about looking for the site, where you're at with that, and if you can give us any insight into where you think that this will be.
Well, we started off by looking at sites all over the Cape. In fact, we looked at about 15 different locations, and but finally focused on 4. I would say 3 really in the Hyannis area. You're probably going to ask me which ones they are, and I'm probably going to say I'm not going to tell you. But we're quite sure that Hyannis is the place to be. I think Hyannis also feels the same way about that. The discussion with the town council has certainly been positive. The discussion with town management has been positive. Right now, we're at a point where conversations have kind of been put on hold until we can complete the Phase 2 part of our study. But the excitement for doing this is there. We certainly know that the economic impact will be major. It needs to be defined, and that's going to be a catalyst for the town management to be able to say, look, this is worth investing in one way or another.
Now, there isn't a lot of land left on the Cape for something like this, and are you thinking that it will be along the lines of redevelopment as opposed to development?
That's a very interesting question. It depends. There are several sites. I guess the answer to your question would be that 2 of them might qualify as being defined as redevelopment, and one of them as something brand new. But in any case, whichever it is, the impact of something like this is huge. Normally, it's considered that when you put a performing arts center into a location, that you get about a factor of 7 to 1 for the investment that goes in there. So whichever it is, it will bring a positive impact.
And I remember hearing you say that you were thinking that this space, besides having an indoor space, would also have a beautiful outdoor area along the lines of Tanglewood or something like that to take advantage of the Cape's wonderful weather. And is that still what you're thinking?
Well, you listened very well. Absolutely, that's what we're still thinking. So, and we've looked at several models of these kinds of performance centers where you open up the door, so to speak, and so suddenly you can have a couple of thousand people sitting on a hill outside while the performance is being put on inside. And then you have the option of doing outdoor concerts as well as indoor concerts. So yeah, absolutely, we're thinking of that as well.
When do you think you'll be able to announce this is where we're going to be? Because obviously then there's a long permitting process, and then there's the building of the structure. So we're probably a couple years after that, but I'm sure everyone would be very excited once they know what the location is.
Yeah, I think, I think if we can complete our Phase 2 study within the estimate of 9 months, then after that, we need a little bit more time to make sure that we can get the money to do this. So I would say, to answer your question, within probably a year and a half, 2 years, we can have certainty.
And now many of us remember who have been on the Cape for a while that it was 20 years ago or so that a process started to build a major performing arts center on the Cape, and that maybe fizzled out because of a recession and different things happening. Does this have more momentum, or are you going about it in a different way where you feel like success is an absolute in this case?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. I think this is the first time in comparison to the other events that the board of the symphony has been behind it, and the symphony would become a major tenant. The symphony thought long and hard, by the way, about whether or not they wanted to be an owner, because, that changes everything. And the answer is that, yes, they are prepared to become an owner. So I think it has a very, very different impetus. The makeup of the board of OSPC is 12 total, of which 10 are also members of the board of the Cape Symphony, and 2 very, very distinguished outsiders. As we grow further into this, after a number of commitments can be solidified, then you'll see that board expanded significantly with others, outsiders. But the symphony will maintain a controlling position. I think because of the nature of the of the management and the business that we're in, I think we have a very different view of what something like this could be compared to the efforts that have been made before. This is, I think, much more solid and much more realistic.
And that's a good place to wrap it up. I think, unfortunately, we're out of time. I've been talking to Jerry Karter, Executive Director of the Cape Cod Symphony and the Cape Cod Conservatory, and we've just received sort of a sneak peek into what's going on with the idea of building a major new performing arts center on the Cape. Thank you so much, Jerry Karter, for being with me here today.
It was a great pleasure.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at CapeCodBroadcasting.com.